Let's begin talking about the French and Indian War, unless you're English, and then we'll call it the 7 Years' War. France claimed most of the land in the middle of the continent, from the Appalachian Mountains all the way over to the Rockies, down to New Orleans, and then up throughout Canada. France had traded with the Native Americans for years in the Ohio River Valley. That's going to be key later. And what they were doing was trapping furs and selling them in Europe because the beaver pelts were a hot commodity over there. British colonists tried to take over the fur trade in the Ohio River Valley, and France had to stop them. So France built a strong alliance with several Native American tribes, mainly the Algonquin and the Huron tribes. And the Native Americans saw that when the British settled new lands, they tore up the land and made farmland, which is something the French didn't do. And if you remember, the French was only taking the furs. They weren't making a permanent settlement. The English was wanting a permanent settlement. Washington, that's George Washington, when he was 22 years old, he led troops into western Pennsylvania to build and set up a fort. Now, the French had beat him to the spot, and this was near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And the name of the fort that the French had set up is called Fort Duquesne. That word is pronounced Duquesne. Now, Washington launched a surprise attack in order to overtake Fort Duquesne. Washington retreated and quickly built Fort Necessity, hoping to fend off the French and Indian attacks. While Washington was fighting the French, several delegates from the colonies got together to discuss the war, or the battles that had been going on. They called 7 colonies and 1 Indian nation, the Iroquois. The goal of the meeting was to form an alliance and unite a colonial defense against the French and these other Native American tribes. A guy named Ben Franklin proposed the Albany Plan of Union. This was an attempt to create one general government. It called the General Council, and what that was that they wanted to make laws and raise taxes and set up the defense of the colonies. Now, this was a great idea, but it wasn't accepted by a single colony. They were afraid they would lose power to a central government. And each general that was appointed to go into the Ohio River Valley to wipe the French from the area was defeated. Most were too loud and caught by surprise attacks while traipsing through the woods. Others were too inexperienced. They all wore bright red uniforms, which made it easy to spot them and shoot them. A lot of the British generals, including Washington's, focus on Quebec and Fort Ticonderoga. Quebec was vital because it supplied many of the French forts. 4,000 British troops gave a surprise attack on Quebec, and it soon fell to the British. In 1763, Britain and France signed a treaty, ending a long and drawn-out war. The Treaty of Paris of 1763 marked the end of the conflict. Britain won the war and gained all of the French land in the New World. Britain now controlled from the East Coast to the Mississippi River. Spain controlled the West. So what are some lasting impacts? The British are in substantial debt from the war. They feel since they protected the colonists from the French and Indians, the colonists should repay the war debt. They also worry about possible Indian attacks on the colonists, violent raids against British troops by a leader of the Native Americans named Pontiac. They also set up the Proclamation Line of 1763. What this is an imaginary line along the top of the Appalachian Mountains. This restricted British colonists from moving into the much-needed Ohio River Valley. Then Britain sent 10,000 troops to enforce this new law of not being able to get over into the Ohio River Valley. Doing so greatly angered the colonists.